morning, y'all. Coming to you live from my kitchen dining room area. Wishing you a happy Saturday. Hoping that you had a good week. Hopefully you were saying your affirmations. I've kind of morphed a couple of them into something a little different. I do say I am the CEO of me and I am the best boss. I say everything is always working out for me. And I also say, oh, don't you hate it when you've got something right there on the tip of your tongue and it completely flies out of your head? Oh my goodness. I say that I am the only one standing in my way, and I stopped doing that yesterday. But today, I don't normally work on Saturdays, but I went in to do a really awesome customer of mine that I've had for about 14 or 15 years that has a granddaughter that's getting married today. And it was so exciting to be a part of her day. And I'm adding to my anthems, I have the best job ever. Because I do. Sometimes I get tired, and sometimes you have rough days no matter how much you love your job. But I have the best job ever, and I get to be a day maker. So that's going to be another anthem that I add to my repertoire. But we're going to go ahead and dive into this day. I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to dive in. We're just doing one chapter today, and I will be reading a good bit of it because it is so important. It really is. This is a very important chapter. It's on gathering evidence to support your new soundtracks, and it is just full of great knowledge to help us with this overthinking. Dear God, I just thank you so much for all that you're doing in our lives, for leading us to good books to help us to grow and to grow closer to you. Lord, I don't want to be able to depend on myself more. I want to be more dependent on you. I want to know that my strength comes from you, that the only reason that I can stand up under the weight is because you're holding it for me. So I just pray that you help us to gather all the wisdom we can from what we're going to study today, and help us, Lord, to just move forward and be closer to you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So we were practicing new anthems. We were definitely retiring old soundtracks. I want to go back to the beginning for just a second and talk about some of the most important things we've got to do to get rid of all this. We want to replace, repeat, and retire old soundtracks. So one of the best ways to do this is to gather evidence to support these new soundtracks. And as said before, we are studying from the book Soundtracks from Jon Acuff. Love it, love it, love it. I have listened to this particular chapter preparing for today probably, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 times, because every time I listen to it, I'm just more impressed. It just has really been very helpful and a blessing to me. So I'm going to be reading from it directly a lot. Chapter 9, Gather Evidence. The best part about the internet is that you can hire your heroes. Everyone you admire is only one tweet or Instagram post away. In many cases, with platforms that are out there and services like online coaching, you can even pay for a little bit of advice from someone who is further down the road than you. That's what I did with James Victori in 2019. Victori is an Emmy Award-winning art director best known for creating provocative posters and advertising campaigns. His work has been exhibited in the Museum of Modern Art, the Library of Congress, and a little building in France called the Louvre. He has also been a long-distance mentor of mine for years. By long distance, I mean he didn't know I existed. But that didn't stop me from learning from him. And in every industry, we do have those heroes. In the hair industry, I've always followed Robert Cromeans and other really successful hairstylists. I have hair mentors that I love to watch cut hair. I probably watch hours of videos a week of people that I really admire their style and their hair cutting style. So I totally identify with John in, hiring your mentors, whether you physically hire them or you're just, I've bought their books, I've bought CDs to listen to. Just, it's so good to glean that knowledge from those people that are just that much further down the road than you. In 2012, I bought his book, Victory, or Who Died and Made You Boss. I read it several times, but what struck me the most was a quote from runner Steve Prefontaine that Victory plastered across the back cover in massive block letters. It said, "Somebody might beat me, but they're going to have to bleed to do it." That line became a soundtrack. I used it when I was building my blog. Whenever I felt like giving up or skipping a day, I would repeat that line. I'd jump back on my laptop and think, you might get more readers than me, but you'll have to write 2 million words because I'm going to write 1 million. 7 years later, as I continued to work on my soundtracks, I was surprised to see that Victoria was offering coaching. I've been following him on Instagram at James Victory, and his entire account was a tour de force of positive soundtracks. Each post was more enthusiastic declaration than the last. I leapt at the chance to do a video call with him, but wasn't exactly sure what would happen. Because people say that you shouldn't meet your heroes because they won't line up to your expectations. I was a bit nervous to talk with Victoria, but my desire for help with my overthinking was larger than my apprehension. So I signed up for a session with him. I filled out a form online and answered a series of questions about my life and waited for the meeting date to arrive. When it did, I had a long list of ideas I wanted to talk to him about. As soon as the video call started, I jumped right in and turned on a fire hose of words. He kept trying to interrupt me, but that just made me pick up speed. Finally, I took a breath and he held up his hands. Whoa, that's a lot. You're really bound up with fear. That stopped me in my tracks. Fear wasn't the word that I would have used to describe the questions I brought to our meeting. I wanted to argue with his assessment, but I'm doing this new thing where if I ask someone for advice, I listen to what they have to say. That is some of the best advice ever. That if I ask someone for advice, I listen to what they say. I just don't continue with what I already think about that subject. But I'm open to hearing a new idea. One by one, line by line, Victoria started to break apart my list of ideas. By the end of the call, I realized he was right. The notes I brought to our conversation weren't dreams, plans, or actions. They were broken soundtracks. They weren't true, helpful, or kind to me, and Victoria saw right through them. For instance, I told him that I couldn't be an entrepreneur because my dad was a pastor and I never learned how to run a business when I was a kid. That broken soundtrack was telling me that because I didn't get business lessons in the first 18 years of my life, like a father teaching his son how to gut a trout. Nothing I ever learned over the next 50 years could change that. I once read that if you haven't learned a foreign language by the time you're 10, the difficulty skyrockets. See, it's so crazy, the broken soundtracks we have in our minds. And we just keep believing them because we like to believe what we already believe. That's why we have to find mentors to help us get rid of these old soundtracks. I took a lot of notes during the conversation, and when Victoria got finished, he got real quiet. "I have a dare for you," he said in a way that only an artist that looks like a pirate poet can. I want you to start saying a mantra that I have used for years. Once again, I bumped into a successful person using a positive soundtrack to build their life the way that they wanted. Say to yourself, everything is always working out for me. Ooh, I flinched. At first, when he said that, it felt a little syrupy. It felt kind of fake. But Victory isn't that kind of guy. He's more punk rock than new age. He's more fight the establishment than skip through a field of flowers. He's a motocross riding, New York City dominating, take no prisoners kind of guy. I followed his career for years and knew he wasn't just giving me an empty platitude to put a pretty bow on our discussion. He was sharing a personal soundtrack that he had used in his own life that he felt might be helpful in mine too. And he didn't want me just to say it once. He wanted me to repeat it. He wanted to say it a dozen, 100 times, 1,000 times, if that's what it took to believe it. More than just saying it, he wanted me to look for it. That's where the gathering evidence comes in. To find examples of it. To point it out to myself and other people. He wanted me to gather evidence. You find the things you're looking for. The reason everything is always working out for me felt fake at first. I didn't have any evidence that it was true. I didn't have any proof, and worse than that, my pocket jury was telling me the exact opposite. A pocket jury is a collection of broken soundtracks that judge your life whenever you dare to be more than you currently are. It can be built from criticism by strangers, comments from friends, missteps, and missed opportunities. It often has reams and reams of evidence that you're not the right person to do anything you're thinking about doing, but yet it's small enough to travel around in your pocket. In addition to getting a really loud whatever trying to work on yourself, the pocket jury also specializes in record scratch moments. Those are the intrusive thoughts that appear out of nowhere to remind you of some mistake you made 4 years ago. That's what's so annoying about the pocket jury. There's no statute of limitations. It will pull out evidence from 10 years deep if that's what it'll take to knock you off track. That's why new soundtracks often don't last very long. That's why we have to keep repeating the anthems and looking for evidence. We take this brand new, bright-eyed soundtrack and send it into battle against a jury that has been preparing for this fight for years. Then we hope the new soundtrack will somehow be louder than all the old ones. Hope is a wonderful thing, but it's not enough. If you want to really believe a new soundtrack, you have to gather some evidence of what you want to be true in your life. That's not a passive experience. Proof won't find you. You have to find it. Fear comes free and faith takes work. That is a powerful statement right there. Fear comes free. Have you ever had to really work on being afraid of something? I haven't. But faith takes work. And faith isn't work when everything's going well, when you're thinking positive thoughts. It doesn't take a lot to say, oh, I have great faith. But faith is really hard when everything's coming against you and you can't see the way out. Gathering evidence, like every other action in this book, is not complicated. The easiest way to do it is to start with something every major city encourages you to do. If you see something, say something. That was Victori's real dare for me. If I saw something that worked out, I needed to recognize it and then say, everything is always working out for me. Not once, not twice, but as many times as it took until the new soundtrack played as automatically as the old ones. And that is key. That is something I really have focused on over the last several months, was really taking that thought and really focusing on the good things, that how things are always working out for me, how I can be a good boss to myself, because I don't always believe that. So every time some little something comes up, oh yeah, of course that happened, because everything's always working out for me. So just keep repeating that new anthem until it is easy to come to your mind as, oh no, every time this happens, something bad happens. You want to retire those old soundtracks so that you can lead the life that you're meant to lead. It's like if I check into a hotel, if they let me check in early, I say everything's always working out for me. If I pull up and get a parking spot that I want, I tell my kids, why did that happen? And they say, everything's always working out for you, Dad. It's so funny. And I keep a list of it. I keep notes in a notebook about the things that I see that are always working out for me. And I've started writing down some things that work out for me and dates, because that is good evidence against any of the negative things that come up here, that get in this mind to tell me that I can't do it. And it just goes on with a few other incidents of how he's gathering evidence. But I think you get the idea about when something works out, just say something to yourself out loud or to someone with you, or write it down. Definitely write down things that are going well, that have happened, that have worked out for you, so that you can prove to yourself that things do. Everything is working out for me. Actually, I was talking to my son this week, and it was really a special moment. I was cutting his hair, and we were talking, and he was talking about just a couple little things in particular, and he said, "Mom, you know what I've realized?" And now he's 27. He's not a little boy. He's a grown man. He said, "I've realized just everything seems to work out, so I'm not going to sit and worry about it." I'm going to tell you something. That really touched my heart to hear my son say that, because I feel like he's getting it. He's getting it, and he's learning that as long as he believes that, everything is going to work out. So that was a really exciting thing for me this week. The more I said it, and the more I wrote it down, and wrote down why it was true, the easier it became to see the examples. It's just so awesome how that can happen in our life. That the more we say these things to ourselves, we see them happening in our life. I'm just scanning through track because there's a lot of really good examples. That's why you got to get the book and you got to listen to it, because there's so many things. But I don't want to read all his examples out of his life. I want to read some of the concrete things that I know we need, because we don't have all day. I know that. I knew I didn't need to look for a negative experience. The pocket jury had taken care of that. Those things were going to find me. And for every negative thing that you think, you need to find 3 positive things to combat that. There's a scientific approach for that in a book called Positivity: Discover the Upward Spiral That Will Change Your Life. It said, this ratio, 3-to-1, is the ratio I've found to be the tipping point predicting whether people languish or flourish. So for every negative experience, for every negative soundtrack, you need to gather like 3 pieces of evidence to get rid of that thing. And that's work sometimes. I knew I didn't need to look for the negative experience because the pocket jury had that taken care of. But the 3 positive things, that's a different story. If I can't find evidence, if you can't find evidence of your new soundtrack in your life yet, look for it in the world around you. For example, he screenshots typos that big companies make because he realizes when he does that it's okay for a small company to do that. If these big ones that have all these lawyers and all these editors make mistakes, it's okay if he makes mistakes. All us humans make mistakes, but we're so hard on ourselves. We have grace for everyone else, but we are so hard on ourselves. Here are 3 steps to catching your pocket jury by surprise. Listen to what it's saying. Gather as evidence about what is really happening and tell yourself the truth. Yes, tell yourself the truth. I love that. That is how you beat a pocket jury. And that's why gathering evidence is so important. Effort is the best form of evidence. What do you think is I was about to read something that's going to be very long, that's really funny and good, but I'm going to skip over that because it takes a lot of time and the point can be made without all that. So I'm going to jump past that. But an overwhelming amount of effort is what gets you the evidence against the pocket jury. Because you can't be passive with these things. The old soundtracks are not just going to go away on their own. You have to really look into your life and see what it is that you can bring up against that thought. There's a really good example in here that I'm going to go over really quick. There was a guy that wanted to launch an online guitar lesson program. And there was a part of him that was telling him no, he couldn't do it. Have you ever set out to do something and immediately this little voice in your head said, well, what makes you think you can do that? Or you don't have any experience, or you've never done that before, it's never going to work. Well, here's where you have to look back into what you've done that can make this work. So this guy got to looking into his life, and he thought, there's a lot of easy ways to find out how to do this online, so I can figure out how to set up guitar lessons online. He realized that he's invested 22 years into learning to play a guitar. He thought about the fact that he's been teaching guitar lessons for 15 years. And he spent over 100 hours creating a study to be able to do this course online. So why would he think he couldn't do an online guitar course? Bad soundtracks. Same as us. We just have to go through and we have to shut those bad soundtracks down. A soundtrack without action is just a fortune cookie. It's catchy, clever, but ultimately empty. If you try to put a new soundtrack up against all those old bad ones, and you haven't gathered evidence, and you don't have proof in your life that this is the truth, it's going to shut you down fast. So you have to look for those things that show why this new soundtrack is true. And I love that, because it's work. We can't just say these little anthems a couple of times and think we're going to just lead a more positive life. We have to shut those jokers down. We just do. We can't. Each bit of evidence was born from effort. Jimmy spent 22 years learning to play the guitar. He didn't just think about guitar. He picked one up for more than 2 decades. He spent 15 years teaching other people, and finally he invested over 100 hours building a course. He didn't beat his overthinking with more thinking. He beat it with more action, because that's always the path to victory. A soundtrack without action, like I just read, is just a fortune cookie. It might be catchy, it might be clever, but until you put it into action, it doesn't accomplish anything. A lot of people will tell me, oh, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. They never sign up for courses, they never buy the books, so they never go to school. Guys, we can't just think our way into doing things and growing as a person or reaching our dreams. We have to actually do the thing. If a new soundtrack that you've fallen in love with, you take it and you fortify it with effort so that if the pocket jury gets loud someday, you'll have the evidence you need. And you do. And he goes in to tell a personal story that in 2008, he had first heard this soundtrack in his mind, I think I can be a public speaker. He said, I didn't have any evidence. How could I? I was just getting started. But I knew I wanted that soundtrack to play for years, so I focused on effort. I'm glad I did, because it turns out the fastest way to make a new soundtrack true is to turn it into action. I spoke at free events. I used vacation days from my corporate job to travel to conferences on my own dime. I have gotten a lot of flack over the years because I have paid to go and do events so that I could learn more, to be the hairdresser I wanted to be, or the makeup artist I wanted to be. I had a lot of people tell me, oh, they should be paying you, or if they're not paying for that, that's not legitimate. No, a lot of times in life, we work for free to get ahead. We work for free to pay our dues, to learn what we're doing, and to feel confident. I practiced my speeches relentlessly. I became a content machine. I still do that. When I study for a lesson with y'all, sometimes it probably looks like I'm a little haphazard, but honestly, I have spent hours going over this material because I feel like it's super important. I have listened to it. I have read it. I try to absorb how to teach classes. I just want to make sure that I can do the best for you. And that's what John's doing here. He became a content machine, turning out 1 million words on his blog. Said, I told you that you were going to have to bleed if you wanted to beat me. So he's pulling up a cute little thing that he found that helped to keep him going. That's still my approach because I haven't arrived yet. I'm outworking my pocket jury every chance I get. 12 action-packed years later, I stepped off stage after a 75-minute keynote at a dental conference in Orlando. The event planner said, we had Seinfeld here last year and you were funnier than he was today. Put that on my tombstone. Why did she say that? It's not because I'm funnier than Seinfeld, obviously. It's because I met a salesman in the Nashville airport who was going to the same event. I chose to sit next to him on the flight. I grilled him for 2 solid hours about his company, its products, and its culture, and then I killed it at the event with the best dental jokes you've ever heard. They would have bombed in every other room in America, but in that room, they crushed it. Because you got to know your audience. You think Seinfeld had jokes about hand tools, burrs, or the Cavitron 300? Of course not. He didn't have to. I did. Because the best way to shut my pocket jury up was to show up with overwhelming action. I'm the one wearing neon green Nikes while I finish this. I'm the one writing down a win and shouting, everything is always working out for me. I am the one who's asking your sales guy so many questions that everyone on the plane thinks that I have a weird obsession with teeth. I'm the one who is going to retire my broken soundtracks, replace them with new ones, and then repeat them so often that they become as automatic as the old ones. And I am also the one who is going to teach you one last way to do all three of those things with my favorite tool of all. And we are going to get to that favorite tool of all next week. Because this week we are going to be gathering evidence to prove that our new soundtracks are true. We are going to be replacing, retiring. I am so bad sometimes. Y'all ever have those moments that just flew out of the head? I feel like Will Smith on his. So we're going to back that up for a second. I am going to be retiring broken soundtracks. You are going to be retiring broken soundtracks this week. You're going to be replacing them with new ones. And you're going to be repeating the new ones as often as you have to make them stick. And we are going to shut that pocket jury up this week. We are going to go on to be the warrior princesses that we were created to be. Y'all have a great week. I'm looking forward to bringing chapter 10 to you next week. It is also a super great chapter. We'll be doing chapter 10 in the conclusion. And then I'll be talking to you about the new book that we're going to start. Have an awesome week. Love y'all. Bye-bye.